Welcome to another episode of The Corner Booth, the official podcast of restaurantowner.com. Today, the restaurant industry is changing faster than ever. Learn from successful independent restaurant operators and other industry leaders as they share best practices that will help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.
And welcome everyone to another episode of Corner Booth. I'm Chris Tripoli with restaurantowner.com. And what we've got coming for you today is probably an answer to many of your questions. We're going to be talking a lot about the step-by-step process of franchise development. Many of you have made that clear that growing and expanding your concept is becoming a little bit more interesting on doing it through franchising rather than strictly your own growth. So we've got an expert in the field. I want to bring you Kendall Ware. Kendall Ware, longtime Restaurant Association supporter, very supportive of restaurantowner.com. Depth of experience in the restaurant industry, has then turned into an advisor specializing in franchising for restaurants. So bingo. Kendall, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and visiting with us. Welcome to Corner Booth.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Glad to be here.
Kendall, listen, I've really enjoyed our prior conversations, and I know that you've got some really good tidbits to share with our listeners. But before we do that, maybe you could just share a little bit about who you are, how you first got interested into the business, and kind of how you got to where you're doing what you're doing today.
Sure. So I kind of fell into franchising by accident, just not knowing the industry I was actually in. But my first job was bussing tables, right? So turned 16, the typical story, parents say get a job, you go find one. The first place that came to mind was a restaurant. So I did that. Started bussing tables, dishwashing, working my way up as the years went on to, serving and eventually bartending. But there's one shift that always stands out in my whole background. And it was when I watched my GM of this full service, very busy restaurant get very overwhelmed. A lot of red flags, a lot of challenges. We've all been there. Everything was kind of falling apart. And he really needed to put his time and effort into the back of house, but he had so many issues in the front of house that he didn't know what to do. And I was 18 years old and said, look, give me your manager card and just go fix the problems. I'll handle the front. I had no business saying that, no business getting involved, but it just worked. And he said, okay, didn't flinch, and I ran with it. After the shift calmed down and he was done, everything was kind of resolved. People were happy, calm, everything was fine. After that, of course, that led me into this managerial path that I never really, again, signed up for, didn't really ask for it. I just tried to solve a problem and it kind of paid off. But long story short, that was my intro to where I realized I love the restaurant business. This is a lot of fun, love serving people, developing others, and just being in that high volume, fun environment. So I kind of stuck to it. But where it changed, where I realized that I was in something bigger than just the restaurant industry, I was actually in franchising, it was when a group of owners showed up. I was a host and a server at a concept. Owners show up and say, hey, Kendall, we signed our first franchise agreement and we want to take you with us to Wheaton, Illinois to go open this franchise. And of course, I had a couple questions, right? One was, where's Wheaton, Illinois? And then the second one was, what is a franchise? So, there I am. I'm 19 years old at this point, and I go and open up my first restaurant. We probably broke every FTC regulation imaginable, from hiring, firing, doing all the things we shouldn't be doing, but none of us knew any better. We were all young, inexperienced, but we got the job done. And then there was another one, and another one, and another one. And you fast forward, right? We go from 7 to 100 locations, and everything in between, right, is all hands-on from us. It's a very small group. And we just figured out everything from the dirt build out all the way to the opening day to then supporting the franchisees after the fact. So overall this time, right, opening almost 100 restaurants, I realized that, yes, I'm in the people business. Yes, I love serving and developing others, but the vehicle in which I'm in that actually helps me achieve that is franchising. And after all this kind of came clear and I was just having the time of my life, I decided to stay in franchising. And that's kind of the path that guided me to now, where I went on to various different brands and various different operational or training roles. CC's Pizza, Genghis Grill, Orange Leaf frozen yogurt, and the list goes on. But I had an opportunity now to kind of work my way up and lead 6 different brands as a president or CEO. The largest brand I had the opportunity to lead was Cinnabon. And of course, there's a few others like Carvel. And then again, I ended up becoming CEO of Orange Leaf as well. So It's been a fun ride, but throughout that journey, I realized there's a lot of challenges, right, in the franchise world when it comes to the relationship. And earlier on, right, being more of a restaurateur than a franchisor, I thought it was all about serving the guest. And technically, it really is. That's the common goal we have. But I learned quickly that really, as a franchisor, I'm supposed to serve and support the franchisees. They're the ones who are supposed to serve and support the guest. And so over those years, right, I had a lot of franchisees push back at me and my young age, of course, mainly around how I didn't know how to run a business. And so I decided to go become a franchisee at age 24. And I did it again at age 27, but really on the side as I was still a franchisor elsewhere, but all with the goal of, one, learning what it's truly like to be in the franchisee shoes, and two, know what both sides of the relationship feel like. So that way I know how to strengthen that relationship and become a best-in-class franchisor. And that's really been the drive for me throughout all these years, especially now, in my own business. I'm all about, helping the emerging brands scale from where they are today to get to that national franchise presence, but most importantly, do it the right way to where you can avoid all those common mistakes and obviously not have any franchisees lose their life savings or 401k or their homes or whatever they put up for collateral. You want to make sure that we don't lose that. So how do you best set them up for success? And that's where I spend most of my time.
So, wow, is the first response there. I mean, I love that. The busser heat of the it's the heat of the shift. And you just
Right.
jump in and say, give me the card. I'll do the best I can. I'll run the front, you run the back, and then bingo, from there on you're in. And I get it.
Right.
Switching to opening up a franchise, you just kind of stepped right into the fire, learned as you were doing it. You mentioned owning and being a franchisor too. So that was a good experience for you. And that was at age 24. What was the concept that you were actually a franchisor of?
So this was a hospitality recruiting company,
Okay.
and they serve the restaurant industry, right? And so I wanted to find something that, one, wouldn't be competing with my day job, right? I was at the franchisor of CC's Pizza at the time. We had about 500 locations across the U.S. And so I wanted to find something a little bit outside the space, but still close to home that I had a passion for, and definitely my first introduction into the whole sales world. But we served, major clients like TGI Fridays, Raising Cane's, Applebee's, First Wash. There's a lot of brands out there that we had, as clients, where we were filling all their day-to-day managerial needs. And some brands we actually worked on their executive teams. But I had an office in Dallas through that franchise, and that was my first introduction into that whole world. And I remember the one thing that a franchisee challenged me on, which was, hey, you don't know what it's like to not figure out how to make your first payroll. And until you
Sure.
do, you don't know what it's like to be in my shoes. And sure enough, right, when that first happened, I did not make enough in that first payroll cycle to pay the team. And I had to get very creative and move some things around. And that's where I was like, okay, I get it. I totally understand now. And so it's my job to, again, set franchisees up for success.
Yeah, there is a revelation, isn't there, when you're the person that's signing the front of the check.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you're in charge of the small business. I remember those days, been there, and
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
there are times when big bills and occupancy costs and payroll, and it's all hitting in the same week, and you just don't have enough there. So, so that kinda goes to that point that a good franchisor is somebody who not just has to have knowledge, but it sounds like they have to have empathy so that the franchisee feels like there's some care, there's some support. I wanna go back to that point that you mentioned because then we're gonna have to spend a lot of time on it, and that's that we're always in the guest service business. That's true.
Mhm.
But you learned really young as you were opening franchises that there's a difference with the relationship between franchisor and franchisee. It's all
Right.
about guest services, but the franchisor's role is really to do the best they can to direct and support the franchisee to succeed at it. You're not directly in the guest service business, I guess.
Right, right. And that was, again, it's eye-opening because it's so hard not to be. If you've grown up through the restaurants, you're a restaurateur, you love serving the guests. That's a big component of why you do what you do. And then to feel like you're not allowed to cross over that line is very challenging, especially in today's world when you got the joint employer concerns and other things that almost feel like you got to kind of take a step back from supporting franchisees. But at the end of the day, it's the hardest part because you have to figure out how do you work through your franchisees and their team members to still deliver that high level, memorable guest experience. And so you have to shift that mindset of, okay, I'm here to serve and support the franchisees. They're here to serve and support the paying guests coming into the four walls of our business. So what do they need, right? What enables them? What keeps them satisfied to where they can deliver that same experience? And I always remember growing up, people always telling us, hey, you have to make sure that you are serving and supporting your team members, right? The employees of your establishment. And are they satisfied? Are they smiling? Are they happy? Because if they're not, then the guests are going to pick up on that. And I heard that forever, right? But then it just dawned on me one day that that's the same relationship between franchisor and franchisee. And that's really what it comes down to. And when a lot of people wonder, like, how do brands fall apart, or why do a lot of closures happen in some brands? It's usually because it's disconnect between the relationship and franchisors trying to jump over franchisees to serve the guests and to launch the LTOs and to do the remodels or whatever it is, right? Forgetting that, wait a minute, the franchisee is the face of this business, and we have to, work through them to ensure that they are the ones with their teams bringing the brand to life.
Got it. It just sounds like it's just a different rule, but yet it's the same objective.
Absolutely.
If you are the direct owner operator, like many listeners are today, they know that they've got to bond well and engage with their staff, happy guest. What I'm hearing you say is that it's not a whole lot different. You've got to bond and engage with the franchise owners. Happy franchisee, happy guest kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah, fully agree. And, I've been able to see it firsthand. I've worked in brands where you could say the franchise relationship is very damaged and nothing can really get done. It's so hard, right? You can't, it's not like you can go tell people what to do. So you have to leverage your influence, but even your influence is hard to leverage if there's not trust and if there's not a relationship that is strong. And I've seen simple things like rollouts or small changes just never get done in a brand only because that relationship is strained. On the flip side, I've seen where the relationship is very healthy. There's a lot of trust, transparency, collaboration. People feel like it's all one team, and that's where brands get to move fast, right? They can launch something overnight if they wanted to and get there with no hiccups simply because they have that buy-in, they have that adoption. So, where there's that low skepticism, you can get a lot more done. But where it's high, it's almost impossible. And that's what creates these fragmented systems that we all try to, solve.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's kind of get into it. You've had a great hands-on experience coming up, franchisee side, franchisor side, a lot of recognizable brands. So how and when did you decide it was good to take your knowledge and then step into the advising and consulting on the franchise side for others, for clients?
Sure. It's one of those things where, so I came into the industry young. And I was openly very driven by, hey, I want to become a CEO one day, right? I want to lead my own brand. I had that hungry, career-driven mentality, and that was before I had kids. That changed a little bit. But, so I was young in the industry, had a lot of access, and had a lot of opportunity, right? But after, I think, the third or fourth brand that I had led, I started to feel this thought of like, wait a minute, is this really fulfilling? Am I really doing what I want to do? Do I love doing this? Or was this more of me having fun in the pursuit to get to this level, right? And I realized it was more about the pursuit. I loved coming up through the industry, right? Learning everything and helping others and turning things around. All that was fun and that lit me up. But once you get to a certain point, right, you find out that you're actually going to be doing the same role and responsibilities every day for many years to come. And that could be bigger brands, smaller brands. It really doesn't matter. End of the day, most brands have the same challenges or they go through the same life cycles, right? You're in triage, stabilization, or growth. Every brand falls into one of those three. And once you've lived through all, which I have, which is a good thing and a bad thing, that, okay, this is a playbook. This is a lever I can pull. And although it feels great to help brands and turn them around and satisfy franchisees and all the things that come with that, you find yourself in this very repetitive environment. And so one day I just thought, wait a minute, could I just create, or take these playbooks that I've created, take all this experience and cast a wider net? Can I help more brands at one time and help teams lead that engagement, right? Lead that implementation versus if I do it personally in a brand with a team, that takes years, right? Some could take 3 to 5 years to really achieve that. But I just felt like I think I could work with more brands at once. And so I started to test the theory. And when I started seeing results and seeing how fast brands can go from what they thought would be an impossible place, right? And actually achieve it and become a franchise and have profitable franchisees. I just felt like, all right, this is something I should lean into and just take the risk, because there's, in my mind, there was also a moment where I thought I needed more credibility to go out and do my own thing. And I kept trying to find that next big role. And then I was like, you know what? I think that's enough, right? There's no reason to keep doing something in theory, thinking that, oh, this is going to get me to one day do my own thing. If I really want to do my own thing, I had to do some soul searching and just make that call and say, okay, if you really want to do this, do it now. If it doesn't work out, you can always go and join another brand sometime. So that was really the drive.
How long ago was that you decided?
Well, technically, this is about 2.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up spending about probably 6 months starting this out, building it up, getting a few clients, but then I had an opportunity come my way, and it was a great opportunity. So I joined a brand, but in hindsight, that was really me taking the easy path. That was me taking the guaranteed paycheck and not taking the risk on myself, right? So I was really close, fell into the trap. Glad I did though. But when that was over, that's when I told myself, I'm not going to fall into that same trap. I've been through it. I know what it feels like. I'm going to stay committed to seeing this through. The other side of this that was kind of the driver is, when you spend enough time in an industry, you start to learn the ins and outs and who does what and what things cost. And in some cases, I just felt like for brands to become a franchise, or for brands that have recently become a franchise and they're trying to figure out how to scale, they were having to spend way too much money to get the kind of support they needed to achieve that. So I also found an opportunity there to say, look, I can help brands do this in a lot more affordable manner, just taking, again, past playbooks and access and experience, and get the job done a little bit faster, a little bit cleaner, and most likely more affordable, because I don't have to go through all the same startup steps. And that's really where the niche kind of was created for me. It's that emerging state where, they need a lot of help. And so they need someone who knows how to work in every area of the business.
Well, what I like about this is there seems to be a balance of two things that's being offered. I'm sure that's what the listeners are keen in on too. One is there's knowledge being offered that is industry specific. You've been franchisor, franchisee, climb the ladder, and run more than one franchise operation. So it's industry specific knowledge that's being offered. And the second one that I'm sure has perked up their ears is that it's more reasonable than some of the options. Because I kind of want to key in on that. I've been in the industry all my life, and I've tripped over that same situation where we've met with some very knowledgeable firms that want to talk about working with restaurant operations. They'll remain nameless, but they're large national firms. And I look at their stuff and I talk with the people, and then you get their fees, and it's like, whoa, I don't know any small independent restaurant operation that wants to budget that kind of money to have assistance in getting set up and scaling and doing it right. So maybe we can definitely speak to that. I want to spend some time now that we know how you got into it. It's been a couple of years. You're advising people who are recent franchisors on operations and scale. You're also advising people who are maybe in the business and wanting to get started. So let's go, if you wouldn't mind, and walk through the steps. If you're talking with me and I've got a few restaurants, I'm operating well, they're profitable, I'm thinking of growth, I don't know much about franchising, but I'd like to explore that opportunity. What is it I need to know? How do you offer that knowledge? Where do we go from there?
The first question I ask everybody is why?
Okay.
Why do you want to franchise to begin with? And it might sound typical and cheesy, but it is a big, important question, because if you don't have that answer, you might be in it for the wrong reasons, right? And it's just good to understand why you actually want to become a franchise.
Got it.
From there, right, there's got to be some directional insights that say this is a good idea for you. One of the second questions I would ask would be, is there any interest? Is there any demand, right? Sometimes I'll ask that question and I'll say, no one's really ever asked me if I franchise. Okay, well, maybe it's just not there yet. On the other hand, I'll hear some brands say, yeah, I think I have 2,000 inquiries over the last couple. I'm like, excuse me, how many? You have something there. Not to say they're qualified, interested leads, but you want to look for signs that there's some sort of demand. And if people are asking you, do you franchise, or can you open up a location here? That's a good starting point, right? From there, there's some other check boxes, right? One of the big ones for me is, have you had at least 3 locations operating for at least 3 to 5 years? And, that's, to me, that's a big question, right? And it's okay if you only have one. It's okay if it hasn't been exact. It's just more so like, what is something to look for? If you have, one location that's been operating for 3 to 5 years, and every year you see profitability grow, top line grow, satisfaction get stronger, efficiencies get better, then okay, you're probably working with something that's great. Well, we don't know if it's scalable yet. We don't know if all the markets need one yet,
Yeah.
but at least you're going in the right direction. And
Got
so
it.
it's really a matter of understanding, is your business model scalable? And the only way to know that typically, and I know it's, chicken versus the egg conversation, but once you open up a second location, what happens, right?
Right.
Can the team still execute without your day-to-day involvement? Can, the systems and the quality still be delivered as they are supposed to be once you open up number 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth? And if not, it's a good place to pause, right? And I spent a lot of my time working with founders directly on how to operationalize their business to ensure that it's scalable. And sometimes that's just taking the, 22 steps it takes to make a menu item and turn it into 10, turn it into 7 steps.
Sure.
Just clarify, right? Find the more simple approach to where, yes, you may have to leave a little bit of interpretation, but you get that same high quality result and it's easier for people to remember and digest. And, if you can check those boxes, right, especially if you know that every year that's gone by, and if you have opened up multiple units, let's say you went from 1 to 3, if your total sales volume also goes up, right, that's a good indicator. And it sounds silly, but I have seen many brands where they actually do less top line revenue as they open up more units.
Sure.
And that math is scary. And so it's
Yes.
just, these are things to watch out for. But if it's on the other end where it is growing, and you would trust your own family member, mom, dad, sister, brother, whoever, if you would allow them to become a franchisee of your business and you're not nervous about that, scared about that, or worried for them, then you're probably in a pretty good spot to now consider franchising to the public.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. And I really like the way that one starts. The very first thing people need to define if they're operating successfully, like you said, a couple of stores, maybe just a few years, you're financially stable. Got it. You've got to answer that question why, which brings to me sort of a definition of a role. Because if you really do feel like you envision that this is a brand that should build, you see yourself more as a brand supervisor. You see yourself more of an executive who is developing and supervising other people rather than a hands-on operator, then it sounds like you're lending yourself a little bit more to be a franchisor. If you feel like you're still going to remain that chef-driven concept and you're going to be in charge of everything, you have your hands in the operation, then that would sound like you'd be telling them that's not a good reason why to become a franchisor.
Right, absolutely, right. Some brands, unfortunately, just cannot be scaled without, right, the founder hands-on and running the business. Some are very specific, driven around people and their name and reputation. Others, right, they may have just an amazing product, great guest experience, fun, atmosphere, and it's scalable, right? They built enough systems and years of operating history to where it can be done.
Sure.
It just really depends. But yeah, that why helps you get there.
Okay. So this is good. So some people are probably nodding their head, saying, okay, I'm there. Okay, I see myself in that. Okay, so let's go further then. What are the steps? I mean, we know that we've heard there's really kind of 2 avenues that have to work simultaneously if you're going to go through franchising. There's the legal items with registration, disclosure documents, franchise agreements. Then there's the operational setup. But I just think that there's maybe not a really good understanding of all that's involved, how long it takes. So maybe if you could walk us through the steps of preparation so that we're prepared to
Absolutely.
franchise.
Sure. One, and this is more of like the prereq to the conversation, is make sure your brand name and any specific attributes you have are trademarked and that you can actually protect them. This gets missed more often than we probably all think, to where there's a brand, it's incredible, it's scaled to maybe 5 units locally, and now they want to franchise, high AUVs, high profitability. They get out there, sign on their first couple of franchisees, and then boom, lawsuits start coming in because a nearby business in a different state or wherever actually has the same name as you. And now we have some challenges, right? And then and most franchisees are going to look for this. They want to make sure that they're investing into a brand that is actually a protected brand. So it's more of a prereq. But yes, can you trademark it? Is there anything about your logo or your brand name that you can't trademark? And if so, make those adjustments before you start trying to franchise.
Got it.
Once that's protected and safe, the first real step is drafting an FDD. And an FDD is the franchise disclosure document. Every brand has to have this in order to legally franchise. If someone's trying to give you access to doing business under their brand name without an FDD or a franchise agreement, that means they're not a franchise. It's most likely a license deal. In that case, you're not protected by the FTC because the FDD and the franchise agreement, also known as the FA, those two documents are really designed to be in favor of the franchisee, while of course protecting both franchisor and franchisee. So
Right.
the FDD is the biggest project you're going to have to work on at first. It is broken down into 23 different items or sections, and each one it has specific purpose, right? There's some basic ones like who's the leadership team, what's the total cost to build out a location and what the ranges are per model type. And the most important one typically is item 19, and that's your financial representation of your model. And this is where if a brand doesn't have it, that's typically a red flag. And most prospects who are looking to franchise, if they can't flip to item 19 of the FDD, they're probably going to pass over your opportunity. And the one thing I'll just add to that, in franchising, you're not competing with those who want to be a restaurant franchise or a hardware franchise. You're competing with anybody who's interested in becoming a franchisee. So they're looking at who performs the best, who has the best brand recognition, who has the best support from the franchisor. And sometimes the same prospect is looking at a restaurant FTD, a fitness, a hardware, you name it, and they're making their decision based upon the FTD in terms of who they should pursue. So you got to keep that in mind of how you stay competitive, and you don't want to give any reason for people to pass you up. But that FTD, it's typically 150, maybe 250 pages. Along with that, you have to have a franchise agreement draft that just shows what the terms would look like, your royalties, your ad fund, your franchise fee, all the things that go into this. But that FTD helps you answer all those questions that you have to come up with to then create that FTD. And so there's hundreds of things you have to answer and figure out, but it all happens in that process. And that process is typically done with the franchise attorney. It can take several months, right? Just depending upon what it is. I've seen anywhere from 3 to 7, 8 months.
Okay.
It just really depends.
And there are, I would imagine, attorneys that specialize in this and that are also industry specific. Is that who you normally, would refer your clients to?
Yes. And where I typically help though, and I have a list I could always share,
Yeah.
where I typically help though is on the front end before that engagement happens between attorney and future franchisor. I help get them the most built out template imaginable to get them close to what the attorneys are going to expect. If you start
Great.
from scratch, right? If you go to an attorney right now, from what I've seen, you will be quoted anywhere from $30,000 to maybe $50,000 just to get that document.
Right.
But that's just the baseline. If there's a lot of back and forth, there are some trademark issues, let's say, or you need extra assistance to create that item 19 to show your finances, whatever that is, that back and forth just racks up more cost. And so I like to get involved before that happens, give them a baseline template with the basics that they need, and then
Right.
they can approach that attorney, and usually the costs are substantially less in comparison.
Sure.
But yes, that's that first step. And again, that's a 2-for-1, meaning you're going to get your FDD out of that effort as well as your franchise agreement draft. But with every franchisee you sign on in the future, you have to, of course, customize that franchise agreement to fit that specific franchisee's LLC and all their specific information.
So this kind of, helps underline what people need to know, that to be prepared correctly, it will take a little bit of time, even if they're really well prepared because they use the services of you or somebody like you. Attorneys are going to take a few months. This isn't something, in other words, that happens very quickly. And even though maybe you don't have to spend, because maybe you will be better prepared, you may not have to spend $40,000 or $50,000. It's
Right.
still significant. So it
Sure.
sounds like it's still thousands of dollars in order to get
Right.
trademarking, registration, and franchise documents done correctly. So yeah,
Right.
so this is going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of money. That's the point we're trying to underline.
Yes. And I always recommend starting out that wherever you do business today, try to grow very strategically in that area. Not only because it helps you save on the upfront cost, because you have to remember some states require registration fees to franchise, some states do not, some states require operational history, some do
Yeah.
not. Every state is different, but there are fees you have to pay. And what I don't recommend is for brands just to start registering all over the United States just because they're a franchise. If you are, operating in Texas, let's say, then how do you just focus on Texas? What other
Sure.
markets, cities, do you feel like your concept could grow close to home? Because also, most importantly, and this always gets missed in startup brands becoming a franchise, supply chain will be your future deal killer. If your supply chain, your proprietary products can't make it to where your franchisees grow, and even if
Sure.
they do, it costs a lot more. This is where brands typically run into a lot of problems. They didn't realize that, oh, wait a minute, I don't have a high enough volume to have another distribution center carry this product for one location. What am I going to do? And then you fast forward and those franchisees are paying 20 to almost 40% more for the exact same
Sure.
cost of a product, and they can't survive that way.
No,
So
no, and
it's
I'm
very
so happy
risky.
to hear you say that because when we were talking earlier and we were talking about the validation of interest, that's one of the reasons why people might want to franchise because they have a lot of people who are interested.
Right.
But I'm happy to hear you talk about a strategy for stepping through the markets that you open, because the problem sometimes with validating interest is that they go right from there into wanting to sell. I've got this guy, and he loves my restaurant. He lives in West Virginia, and he said there's nothing like me there, and he's got a lot of money, and he could open up 4 stores. So I said yes. And let's say you're based in Utah. What the heck are you gonna, yeah,
Yeah.
so you're right. I think a growth strategy has to be, as you mentioned, start with where you are, and then you kinda direct what markets you're opening to sell franchises rather than reacting to the phone calls of, "Hey, I love what I read and I wanna open one. It's 3 states away and you can't support it yet."
Very tough.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so we understand there's gonna be some months and some budget, and there's the legal and the trademark work. Maybe some people don't thoroughly understand the operational setup that's needed either, and how you can help with that and how long that takes. So maybe we ought to start with why there is a difference between doing operations manual for franchise growth versus your own ops if you're a small company-owned unit, and what all goes into it and how you can help develop that.
So yeah, your first biggest expense to become a franchise is going to be the FTD and FA, right? The
Right.
second is going to be this franchise operations manual. And there are some specifics around this, right? It's going to be harder to go and create it on your own for the first time because there's many legalities that could come up between what's written in there and what is in your FTD or your agreement, and of course the joint employer risk of this. So,
Sure.
of in a normal operations manual or a handbook, right? It's usually policies, procedures, and very clear on what your expectations are. And in a lot of cases, it's almost just kind of telling people what to do or what they have to do to meet their job requirements. In franchising, right, the franchisees don't work for the franchisor. They're independent business owners. And so we cannot tell them what to do, especially with their own people. So for example, we can't have restrictions in there on how to schedule. We can't ever walk into a location and go up to a team member of a franchisee and say, hey, your shirt's untucked, tuck that shirt in. We can't do that, right?
Mm.
So a franchise operations manual has to be very detailed to where it matches whatever the high level expectations are in the FDD and franchise agreement, in addition to anything that can be deemed as a brand standard, right?
Right.
I can say to a franchisee, hey, your team member over there wearing a normal black t-shirt, that does not meet our brand standard of wearing the black t-shirt with our logo on the chest, right? That's a different dialogue. And so you have to make sure the manual speaks to what is specific to the brand and is an actual standard or recipe or procedure, policy, whatever it may be. But it has to be an actual standard of the brand. And then that can be, they can then be held accountable to what that is. And so, yes, you're still going to go over how to make the pizza, but it's going to be through a different approach. And some of the language, right? Sometimes it's just a word will have to be different than what it would normally be in corporate operations. The best way to remember this is when you own your own restaurant and you're running the business, you can be directive if you choose. Everybody has a different leadership style. Not saying it's right, wrong, or different, but you can be directive. You can simply say, we have to do this by this day. In franchising, you have to lead with influence. And so it's more so around how do you get the franchisee to see something through the guest eyes, right? So, hey, what do you remember what our standard is around the guest experience? Oh, yes, I'm supposed to have X, Y, and Z, ready to go. Well, as you can tell, we're missing out on one of those right now. So what do you think that does to the guest experience, right? And this back and forth dialogue that takes so much more time and patience, but it's the right way to lead a franchise. And so as long as it's in your franchise operations manual, you can hold people accountable to it. If it is not, this is where the breakdown happens. A lot of franchise brands, they want to change, let's say, a POS system in the future. They want to add additional smallwares to make certain menu items. And if they don't have that safe, protective language somewhere that, this list can change at the franchisor discretion, or from time to time, we might roll out new POS systems with different, hardware expenses and so on and so forth. If you don't have the right language, sometimes you're stuck. And this is why and how you see brands become inconsistent over time, is they simply didn't have the right language or the right influence, and franchisees start to revolt against that. So as long as you work with somebody who knows what to look for and what to add, it's more so about having the right language that you could exercise, but it doesn't mean that you have to.
Got it. And see, I think that that's something that everybody is probably, maybe either hearing or learning for the first time, that an ops manual, if you own your 3 units and you know that you've got very specific things from opening to closing and shift duties and whatnot, well, that's wonderful, because we do have to give that to the franchisee. Recipe and prep and approve vendors, and that's one of the things that I guess a franchisee feels there's the value in when I buy a franchise, is I'm getting a plethora of knowledge. I'm getting a use of the brand. I'm getting, the knowledge of how to operate.
Right.
But I'm being directed more through general influence rather than,
Mhm.
specific task, because I am a
Right.
company. So it has to be careful, and you're really going to be needing, I think, some assistance to put this kind of a thing together.
Yeah.
Based on your experience, if you're a small, casual, full-service restaurant, so that means you've got back of the house, you've got front of the house, you've got service, you've got management, you've got accounting, marketing, bar, maybe even private dining facilities. To go ahead and put all of that ops together, how much time are we looking at that they're going to need to dedicate to get this done correctly?
To become an overall franchise and be launch ready to go, right, it could take a good 6 months,
Oh,
a minimum, right? Upwards of maybe 9 months. Now, it
mhm.
really depends upon how prepared the brand is, right? And what the model type is. If it is let's just say something very common, like a pizza related restaurant of some kind, there's going to be a lot of documentation, a lot of legalese, a lot of things that people already know about that category, to where it's going to be a little bit faster. But somebody who's in a whole different model or newer emerging, area, maybe there's less, it could take time. But in terms of the casual side of all this in the dining space, it just takes more time in general, right? When I was COO of Walk-Ons, we were, full service, casual dining brand.
Mhm.
Some of our locations were 10,000 square feet. And it's just a different animal, because now you may find the right franchisees to partner with, and they're aligned with your brand culture. They pass all the initial criteria around financials and things like that. But now they have to go find the spot, and you got to go through
Yeah,
construction. And that could take 18 months just to get your first one open, right?
sure.
And so, one of the other questions you have to ask yourself is, what kind of franchisor do you want to be? Because if you got these long opening times, what is that franchisee doing for that year and a half that they are waiting to get that first unit open? How do you engage them? How do you ensure they don't kind of fall off and disappear on you, and just, from their mindset, they might say, you know what, I'm going to miss out on my upfront non-refundable franchise fee, but I changed my mind, right? You don't want that to happen. And so how do you keep them engaged, have them included, bring them into the right meetings, have certain touch points and support criteria to where they still feel like they're a part of a brand, even though technically they're not there just yet in terms of a full-blown operation.
Got it. Got it. Okay, this has been really, really helpful. I mean, excellent detail, getting ready operationally, getting prepared legally. Now, let's say we're there. Okay, so 2 big key things: selecting, the right franchisee. I've heard different opinions on this. I've always heard people that say, I can't wait to buy a franchise because I'm very excited about this concept. I'm going to buy this franchise because I've always wanted to be in business for myself. So this is kind of an easier way to do it. I love this concept. I eat there. I'm going to buy a franchise. This way I can kind of be in the restaurant business on my own without really creating one.
Right.
And I've heard some people say, see, that's a perfect franchisee. It saves them all of the steps. But I've heard other people say, don't select that as the franchisee. If someone really wants to be in business for themselves, tell them to go do it. Because a franchisee, is sort of in business by themselves, but they are sort of confined by the direction, and the value of the brand. So you're really looking more for a soldier, someone who wants to charge the hill and be happy to do it every day. I don't know. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah. My answer is different depending upon the brand size.
Got it.
So, if you go back to like my days with Cinnabon, we had over 2,000 locations globally. I would prefer to have the larger, right, private equity backed groups who are coming in and maybe doing 50 at a time, right? Because once you get to a certain scale, it's very difficult to keep up with individual franchise owners, and you want to maintain that relationship, you want to maintain the trust, and it's just harder to do, right? Not saying it's right or wrong, it's just harder to do. Now, if I'm starting out, I am going after those guests, those consumers who love my brand and want to operate it. They have that drive. And most brands, if you go and interview them or ask them their history, most brands initially grew with guests of the establishment who loved it so much, saw on the cup that it said now franchising, they reached out and their lives changed forever, right? Because they were huge fans of the brand. And that's great because you do have that passion, you have that drive, and it gets your brand as a national franchise. However, as you start to scale, some of those people may not have the business acumen, right, or the financial means to continue on. And in my opinion, that's not on the person. I will never hold that against any prospect. If they don't have that business acumen, that's not their fault. I look at it as franchisor's responsibility to give them the resources, the training, the coaching, and ensure they become knowledgeable in business acumen and know how to keep their business operating from a financial viewpoint. So over time though, right, the headaches become bigger and you have more opportunity and people have watched your fast growth and you're going to get more sophisticated franchisees, most likely from other franchise brands who are looking to add to their portfolio. And you've probably seen this happen a lot where you see a brand who's starting to grow and out of nowhere, it skyrockets even faster. And that's usually because groups of franchisees from other brands that may have tapped out their territories are looking for the next territory and brand to grow with. So they go to the hottest concept and just add more fuel to that fire. So that's just my take on it. I think it's a very valuable thing to have in the beginning, but over time, you might start to notice some challenges where you'll have to upgrade when the timing's right for your brand.
Great. Okay, so we've selected, we're operating. What seemed to be your take on maybe current industry challenges and how they're affecting people who are wanting to get started as a franchisor?
We kind of touched on one, but it's the high cost of entry that is only going up.
Yeah.
And again, when I hear the single unit location call me and say, hey, I became a franchise. I'm trying to grow now. I really don't have any more capital. I spent over $100,000 to launch my franchise. I of course pause. I'm like, whoa, how did you spend $100,000, right? Well, somebody charged me $50,000 for an ops manual. Somebody charged me $50,000 for FPD. It's like, oh no, and it's just too expensive. Now they don't have enough working capital to actually show up where they need to show up. The franchise booth, doing, digital ads, starting to position their brand in the eyes of franchise prospects. There's no money left, right? So that we've kind of touched on, but that is a huge challenge. The bigger one, once you get open, is how you continuously strengthen that franchise relationship.
Right.
And in any brand I've been at, whether full-time, part of the brand or consultant, most of the time, the initial challenges and the things that we have to fix and overcome is the relationship. And that's why I created this term, right? I created this term called friendship because I want friendship to become the new franchising, right? Like when people talk about it today, and you may have heard this, people say, oh, the Z-Zor relationship, the Z, the Zor. And one, grammatically, it drives me crazy because neither word has a Z in it, but they spell it Z-Zor. But that aside, words do matter. It sounds like it's us against them or them against us. Z-Zor, Z versus Zor. And it's the number one thing that has just drove me crazy in the industry over the years. And in my mind, friendship represents a new meaning. Because one, some of my closest friends that I have in life are former franchisees of mine, right? Some of the strongest relationships are franchisees or franchisors, right? And I look at it as a mixture of partnership, relationship, friendship. And that's what friendship is to me. And so I just think that if people can focus on that and keep the franchise relationship, right, top of mind and redefine what it used to mean, we can all move faster and further together. If we can just build the collaboration, have the trust, be very transparent, and make those franchisees feel like they are a part of our brand, regardless of their tenure or when they joined and all the different factors, that is going to create that cohesion that gets things done and drives that top line revenue that makes every party happy, satisfied, and more viable for the long term.
Creating friendship. I love it. New term.
Right.
We will learn
That's
today.
right.
But boy, that's it though. Because really everything that you were talking about, I guess if you're selecting them correctly, if you're transparent through the process, they're involved, feeling engaged, you're creating the trust that's required. So you got friendship. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Hey,
And that's how you measure how you want to show up to them, right? Like, what are you going to provide that strengthens that relationship? Sometimes it's little things like, hey, I'm going to commit to every month, I do a monthly P&L review with my franchisees, or I
Right.
do quarterly business reviews. I do Friday marketing calls, whatever it is, have something that is consistent that shows that you were there to build that friendship with them. And that, again, you're going to look out after their bottom line profitability, not just your own.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing these tips. These tips are going to be helpful to the listeners. I think it's also created maybe a lot more thoughts.
Yeah.
How can people reach out to you, learn more about you and your company so that as they go through this process, you might be able to assist them?
Absolutely. So my website is kendallware.com, nice and simple. Email is kendall@kendallware.com. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram pretty actively, LinkedIn, but whichever your preference is, I'm there and would love to connect, of course, and help in any way that I possibly can.
Well, this is good because there's going to be questions as people go down the road. You're obviously very, very well knowledgeable, experienced, and I know that if I was going to be doing something, I would need a coach on the sideline to walk me through it step by step. So thanks again for these tips today. Wish you the best as you continue to advise people throughout the process. And everybody out there, listen, if you need more information, contact Kendall.
Please. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Everybody go make it a great shift. And I hope we can cross paths real soon on another Corner Booth. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on the Corner Booth. We'll be back next Tuesday with more inspiration, insights, and industry best practices to help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.